Hey everyone, so I wanted to make a video comparing the Sony a7 III to the new Canon, and the reason I want to do that and forget about Nikon is for a personal reason. When I first got a camera, and this was only recently, it was Christmas of 2017, so 9 months ago, I was stuck between a Sony or a Canon. I didn't like Nikon. It wasn't because they're not good cameras, because I know they are. I've seen them, I've used them a few times. I just didn't like using them. I didn't like how they felt, I didn't like how they looked, which is a bit of a weird thing to say for a camera. It's supposed to be how they take images. I didn't like how the lenses looked, because, I don't know, I just didn't like how they worked with the focus ring at the back. Whatever, it doesn't matter. I was choosing between a Sony and a Canon. Now, I went with Sony. I'm going to be honest about that. I went with the Sony a7 II over a Canon, and it was simply because it had more features and it was just better than any Canon for the same price. I spent $1,000 buying an a7 II, and that came with image stabilization, it came with better dynamic range than the Canon, it came with face detect, it came with continuous shooting at 5 FPS, whereas I think the Canons that I was looking at could only do 3.5. It came with a headphone jack and a microphone jack, so I don't know, there was nothing out there except for maybe the Canon 80D that could really match it. But then again, the Canon 80D was a cropped sensor, whereas the a7 II was full frame. Now, in September of 2018, I shoot with an a7R3. I sold my a7 II a while ago, and I bought the a7 III when it came out. I was probably one of the first in the UK to get an a7 III from the actual, from buying it. But I soon sold that and exchanged it for an a7R3, and I can explain why in another video at some other point. But I am severely disappointed with what Canon brought out, and I'm not even a Canon shooter, okay? I suffered a little bit between buyer's remorse when I bought the Sony, because let's face it, Sony lenses are super expensive. Okay, I have a 70-200 f4 that cost me £800 used. That's stupidly expensive. On Amazon today, I could get the same sort of lens from Canon for 700 brand new. There's just, I don't know, it nagged at me a little bit, but I didn't want to get a DSLR because everything mirrorless was bringing to the table was so fantastic, even back on the a7 II, that I just didn't see the point crippling myself and going for a DSLR over a mirrorless system. I'm glad that I chose Sony, because Canon clearly don't give a flying rat's ass what their customers want. I'm severely disappointed with them, and I feel bad for anyone that waited 6 or 7 months instead of getting the a7 III just to see what Canon would bring out, because they've been let down. And I think more people should hold Canon accountable for their lack of service to their customers. I was waiting to see what they would bring out, just in case I wanted to sell my Sony stuff and buy it, just so I'd have access to more lenses and just cheaper lenses overall. But I'm not going to anymore. I'm going to stick with Sony until I don't need a Sony anymore, until Sony bring out a new camera that's better, or Canon does maybe, but I don't think they're going to for like another 5 years perhaps. I'm just going to start spending money on better Sony lenses like the G Master lenses, because they are amazing. My biggest problem with the new Canon EOS R is not only its price, but its crippledness. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way, I mean crippledness in the sense that Canon literally crippled this camera. They took the sensor from the 5D Mark IV, which some would argue is a bad sensor. I would say it's a perfectly good sensor. It's not as good as the Sony sensors, but it's a good sensor. They kept the 1.7 crop in 4K, which in this current day and age, in late 2018, makes no sense, because Nikon and Sony are both shooting full frame, full 4K. It doesn't make any sense. And then not only that, but they didn't even put 120 FPS in HD in there, in full HD in 1080p. It doesn't make any sense. Sony's been doing that now for a year. Canon has been doing that, I think, on some other cameras that they do. It's just baffling. It doesn't make any sense. It's not even like you can put it into crop mode and shoot at 120p, 120 FPS at 1080p. No, you have to drop down to 720p, and that doesn't make any. No one uses 720p anymore. I don't even remember the last time I watched something at 720p. Now that my iPhone has 1440p resolution, no, I don't think anyone needs 720p anymore. I know that a lot of people will complain about the one card slot. I agree. It's definitely a stupid decision to only put one card slot in this camera, especially considering that the A7 III has two, and the EOS R includes one card slot of an SD type. So it baffles me a little bit. It's a bigger camera as well. If anyone didn't know, it's a bigger camera than the A7 III, but somehow it's got less things. The new Nikon has only one card slot, but I kind of forgive it because it's XQD. And although I would still rather have two, you couldn't fit two XQD card slots in that camera. I've watched Tony's recent video, and apparently the EOS R has corrupted his card, I think 3 or 4 times now. So clearly it was a done deal for them not to put it in and lose a lot of customers. There's no arguing that. It's not like a firmware update can fix all of these issues. And I know a lot of people out there might say, oh, but they said they're going to announce a firmware update. So what? People who are putting up reviews now who say, oh, this is a pre-production model and we can't take it seriously, it's bullshit. These cameras are being manufactured, they're going to be sold as is. It's just the way it is. And it's terrible. It's really, really sad to see that Canon have wasted people's time and they've made their customers look like idiots for even believing in them. And it's just a shame. I mean, did you know that although the EOS R touts 8 FPS, it actually doesn't do that. It can only shoot one frame at a time in eye autofocus continuous. So it's not continuous, it's single AF eye autofocus, whereas Sony has been doing eye autofocus continuous at 8 FPS for the last year. I don't even know where to start. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. And I'm appalled. And I want you guys to, I don't know, stand up for yourselves and just say no. This isn't what we wanted. This is not what we deserve. More importantly, because I know there are people out there that think this camera is good, and they're entitled to that opinion. Okay, you're allowed to think that a camera is good. If you compare this camera to an 80D, yeah, it's better than an 80D. It has a swiveling screen, it has a better resolution, better sensor, better tracking. But the 80D is a whole $2,000 less, almost. Especially if you include the lenses, it's going to be a hell of a lot cheaper. So, I don't know. I don't see any reason why someone would buy a Canon today. Maybe they'd get a Nikon instead because they don't like Sony. I don't know. I think Sony got a lot of stake for, I don't know, rubbish reasons like only having one card slot back in the day and having a small grip. But these things are now fixed, and they've been fixed for over a year. I do think that it's just because, for the reasons I mentioned earlier, people wanted to wait and see what Canon would release so that they could say, finally, a great mirrorless camera from Canon. But I don't think anyone can say that now, and I think that anyone that does say that is lying to themselves. Anyway, I want to hear what you think. Let me know down in the comments below. I know this is a short video. This is probably the first video of myself that I'm going to put up. So some love would be nice. If you would like to hit the like button or subscribe, that's fantastic. I'll try and get some more videos out. I have got another video planned in my head, but I just had to get something out about this camera because, well, not only is it the relevant time to do so, I wanted to put my 2 pennies in. I think that if you are looking for a camera in late 2018 and you have $2,000 to spend, buy a Sony. There's no reason not to. It's got the best dynamic range, eye autofocus. It's got fantastic lenses if you can afford them. The used market is getting bigger. There's far more lenses out there now than there ever was before. So there's no reason not to. There really isn't. Alright, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.